Welcome back. I have a very interesting subject for you this week, in week 3 of the technology of decentralization. And the topic is social media and what is wrong with it, how to fix it, and what role decentralization has in the solution. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I have 2 guests, Christian Gribneau, who is also on the board of directors of the Knowledge Standards Foundation. He runs a development shop and is a veteran developer, has started working on a new startup, which he will tell you about, called Ology. And there's a very specific reasons why I invited him that will become clear as we go forward. And the 2 of us have invited Dmitri Zagidulin. Do I have it right?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Thanks.
And we're very glad to have him for 2 different reasons. First, he's working on Tim Berners-Lee's solid project. And he's also one of the main people responsible for the W3C's DID web protocol. So distributed identifiers, and that actually is going to be one of the big topics of next week. But it starts to become very relevant this week as well. So let me give you an introduction then. I'm going to talk about 2 questions. What's the problem with social media, basically, and why not just let government regulate it? I'm actually going to begin with a little history. So between 2005 and 2010 or so, there was a massive competition among many social networks, as they were called, to attract the most people and the biggest influencers. And people who remember those days will know what I'm talking about. There was this massive competition. And it was in this period when most of the big social media networks were founded or rose to prominence, and in some cases ended up like ousting the also-rans. So, and I mean things like Facebook, which was the Facebook and started a few years before 2005, but it really rose to prominence in that period. Reddit, ditto. Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So these all were founded or rose to prominence in that interesting 5-year period in which the internet really transitioned from one that was governed by protocols, in which there were clients who were talking to each other, and there was client software like email software, for example, or IRC chat software, or whatever, or Usenet forum reader software. These were clients, and they talked to each other via federated servers. In other words, there wasn't any center anyway. You don't need to know all the details, the technical details, to understand the following. The way that people were interacting was via the software that was on their computers, not on websites for the most part. It's a little bit, right? But there were no central corporations that acted as the clearinghouse of information. In fact, previously, the biggest ways of interacting socially online, so you could call it social media, I guess, were Usenet, which is a certain kind of discussion forum, well worth study if you're into internet history. Email discussion groups, which also are kind of out. It's like I'm not even in any anymore. Web forums, we've got one, but it isn't being used. And I think I know why, because it's kind of out too. IRC, which has basically been replaced by Slack and Slack-like systems. Some people still use IRC. And then it had varieties that made it easier to use, like ICQ. And then blogging. Blogging is, of all of these, the only one that remains. Now, email is still out there, of course, but I was talking about email discussion groups as a kind of social media. Those also still exist. People still do use them, yes, but for the most part, they have fallen out of favor. And blogging, out of all of those main social ways of interacting before 2005, it's the only one that's still around, and it's used a lot, and it is used a lot. A lot of people don't think so, but it's absolutely true. It's huge. Usenet and IRC were actually names of protocols. Email discussion ran via SMTP, and open source discussionless software like listserv and Majordomo. Those were two of the discussionless software. There's lots of different open source forum software. There still are, actually. And then, of course, there were the blogging standards, RSS and Atom. So I list all of these buzzwords here because those buzzwords represent the standards that were used to communicate, basically. And it was all open source, and it was all free, and there was no way for any giant Silicon Valley corporation to control it all. It was just impossible, because it wasn't, the architecture of the system just didn't work that way. So there was a massive difference between the Web 2.0 sites, the ones that I listed earlier, and the old systems. The old systems were based on common standards. There was no single dominant corporation controlling each flavor of online social interaction, because it was all run peer-to-peer or server-to-server, decentralized. So we now know, I think, and this is my answer to the question, basically, what's the problem with social media? We all know that it was a mistake. Facebook, Reddit, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, they could have and should have been built on protocols like the old networks, but they weren't. And more of us should have known and basically warned the less technical people that it would end badly. I don't think we realized how badly that it would wind up, but I think very badly, actually. I think that among the problems with things like Facebook and Twitter now are a lot of censorship, top-down control, generally speaking, not just censorship, but they promote certain kinds of posts and demote other kinds of posts, and that encourages bad behavior. And then, of course, there's the problem that because all of our data is filtered and managed by these giant corporations, they have the ability to monitor us in ways that we wouldn't. We prefer that they not do so. And if we owned the software through which we were interacting, then of course they wouldn't be able to do that. And yeah, at best we might let them install something on our software, and then they'd pay us for it or something. I don't know, but we would never let them do that. So this started being complained about a lot. I mean, people have been complaining about it practically since the beginning, but people really started complaining a lot, actually on the left more than on the right. And what people on the left were complaining about, in addition to just the bad behavior that they saw, was the privacy problem. And then when conservatives started getting shut down for their alleged bad behavior on Facebook and Twitter and so forth, culminating with the deletion of Donald Trump's account from Twitter and Facebook, then that conservatives got up in arms. Now, the solution that both sides seem to have pushed is government regulation. The problem, as I see it, and I'm going to let my guests speak about this if they want. The problem with government regulation as a solution to this problem is that, well, the authority is still concentrated in the hands of those giant social media companies, but it adds another giant centralized player to the mix, governments, and governments everywhere, which not only complicates matters, it actually could make matters much worse, right? I mean, if you're worried, if conservatives are worried about censorship, why would you think that the government will not, in the hands of Democrats or the Labor Party or whatever, why wouldn't you think that they would basically shut down conservative discourse? I mean, and it would be the government doing it because, of course, it's hateful or whatever. It doesn't. So you don't want the government involved in saying, in declaring winners and losers. That's my view. The solution, and similarly with what I would say to people on the left who are concerned about particularly privacy issues, having government regulation doesn't usually work. The regulations that come in are regulations that the giant corporations agree to with governments, and that usually lets them do what they want to do. So it's not going to solve the problem. The solution is going back to decentralized protocols and building new kinds of clients. They're going to be better than the old ones were, and creating protocols for, well, the topic of this week, social media protocols, and making it possible then to take your blog, for example, and transform it into a way to broadcast your, tweet-like messages to the world and have them received by other people, but not involving Twitter at all. So I'll be talking about that a little bit. Now, we decided to break up the conversation into a couple of days, and so we're back. And now I wanted to give Christian and Dmitri an opportunity to respond to the first couple of questions, which I think are, closely interrelated. So, what's the problem with social media, and why not just let government regulate it? Of course, how and whether you want the government to regulate it depends on what you think the problem is, or the problems. So I don't know which of you guys would like to go first. Maybe Dmitri.
Sure, I'm happy to go first. So these are all excellent questions that I think are a lot on our minds these days. So what's the problem with social media? I think the author and blogger Cory Doctorow and privacy advocate writes really well about it, specifically about the problem with current social media, which is monopoly, the use of IP restriction to prevent interoperability. So we have in each sort of zone, in each area of social media, whether it be short blogging, long form blogging, sharing of photographs, chat rooms, in each one, there tends to be basically these days just one player. And even between the areas, they're consolidating. So, Facebook purchasing Instagram and all that. So in trying to maintain the monopoly, Facebook very carefully, although Facebook publishes the data format, the schema of their posts, of their API endpoints, they very vehemently, through lots of lawyers and through DMCA takedown notices, prevent anybody else, any unauthorized client or server, from interoperating with them. Now, it's especially rich and ironic because when Facebook itself started, it was able to bootstrap by making posts to MySpace, which was very popular at the time. So it would interoperate with MySpace. It would say, hey, this post to MySpace was done on this new thing, Facebook, go check it out. Except now they are explicitly preventing new onboarding. They're preventing the rise of new competition by forbidding that interoperability on a legal rather than technical level. So I think that's the main problem. We have centralization monopoly, who is using lobbying and DMCA to prevent interoperability, which is, I think, what a lot of users want. Now, we are seeing several projects out there, whether it's the ones Christian and Larry are going to be talking about, the Fetiverse project, the sort of loose aggregation led by Mastodon, but also a lot of other server software, and things like Secure Scuttlebutt. So we are seeing some of these indie networks emerge there, but there are, of course, migration and onboarding challenges, which I'm sure we'll get to. So definitely a lot of growing pains there. So that's the problems with social media as I see it. But I do have a lot of hope in these up and coming indie projects, which, again, what this program is about. The question of why not just let government regulate it is a thorny one. There's really good debates and points on either side. I tend to equate it with, it reduces, honestly, to the question of encryption. Should government regulate encryption and cryptography, or will government be required to have a backdoor? The reason I say the question reduces to the problem of encryption is that it is possible to technically enforce the inability of governments and other bodies to regulate by building peer-to-peer and encrypted protocols. The legal and social question still remains: should government have access to it? And if that's the case, if it is true that should governments be able to regulate social media reduces to should governments be able to regulate cryptography and require backdoors, that's a much easier question to answer. Every single security researcher that you will meet will tell you a vehement no. because if the government has backdoors, that means other undesired parties can easily get those backdoors and hack everything. Similarly, if the government is allowed to regulate social media, if the current government that's in power you approve of, and you think, oh, that's a pretty good idea, what happens in the next term, in the next election cycle, when it is a government you deeply disapprove of that will have that same power of regulating social media and having encryption backdoors? That immediately becomes less of a tempting proposition. Now, so what does that mean? Does that mean I sort of condone a lot of the online bullying, a lot of abuse, a lot of hate speech, all of these things that are genuine problems right now in the social media space? Not at all. I do think that a lot of those things can be solved by giving people and communities better tools for moderating, for filtering, for reporting, for reputation technologies, all of those things, which are genuinely complicated. But if we think that that's complicated, government regulation of social media is also incredibly complicated and thorny and subtle. Anyways, so yeah, I'll just take the first two questions and hand it over to Christian.
Very good.
Thanks, Dmitri. Yeah, I actually agree with both of you guys on a lot of this stuff. My focus is less on the personal use of social media and more on the use by publishers and influencers, which is a completely different character. And the project that I'm working on will enable people to find the public narratives that they want. So I simply step away from all of the issues with cryptography and reorganize the network so that the organizing paradigm is identity, and you have global addressing for content and many networks that can interoperate with one another so that people can contribute narratives, public narratives, and find the public narratives that they want. And in terms of government regulation, I also sidestep that by making the whole thing public and let them take a look at anything they want, anytime they want. Now, this is a completely different approach than most people are taking. But the reality of the matter is that most of what we put on social networks, even if we imagine that it is private, is not. And I don't think that unless you're doing end-to-end encryption and you're actually going to put the keys in the hands of the individual to enforce their own privacy, I don't really believe that there is any. I just don't think that there is. I mean, I think that employees at Facebook and employees at Twitter can read just about any private message that people imagine that they have sent, discreetly between one another. Certainly the case with Snapchat and things like that. The issue of privacy has, in my view, been largely false. There isn't any privacy. And if you pretend that there is, unless you're actually doing end-to-end encryption, you're just disregarding reality. So what I do is I just take a look at it and I say my primary concerns with social media, while I recognize all of the issues around communication between persons, my primary concerns are in the area of censorship. And censorship is not much of an issue regarding private communication. I mean, nobody censors what you say to your second cousin that you see, once every 5 years. That's just not interesting. There's no attempt to censor any of that. The things that get censored are entirely public. So what I'm working on is, it simply sidesteps almost all of that and gives people an opportunity to find what they want to find rather than what some network wants them to find. And that's my take on it. So I recognize the issues, but to a large degree, I simply set them aside and walk around them.
Mhm. Very good. Well, I think that's a good beginning point for us. So the next three questions are, they get into some details. So the next question is basically, what would a decentralized social media network be like, especially one that's peer-to-peer? And maybe we can discuss a little bit the distinction between server-to-server decentralization versus peer-to-peer decentralization. Um, and then we're going to go into the tools and the networks that we have been working on, and then using those as examples, examine the question how to make such networks interoperable, essentially. But let's begin with the first of those questions, which is, what would a decentralized social media network look like? So we're talking about, and if you can try to put this in as simple terms as possible, and maybe define any sort of jargon that you use, maybe use some analogies and comparisons to help people visualize what we're talking about here. So, Christian, why don't you start this time?
Sure. So the way I look at decentralization of this kind of communication is I break it down into really three pieces. And those three pieces are identity and content and interoperability. And this is specific to the public networks that I'm talking about. But I believe very strongly that your identity should be something that you are able to control yourself, right? And if you're going to participate in a number of different networks, you should be using the same identity. Should you so desire. You might have different identities for different networks depending on preference, but it would be best if you could keep your own identity.
Can you stop a second and just explain what you mean by identity? Because I think a lot of people, when they hear this, are not really going to know what you mean.
Sure. So when you use Facebook or Twitter, you have a username and
Yep.
you have a password, and you log in with your username and your password, and you become that persona. So you're twitter.com/Alice, right? Or facebook.com/Jonathan, right? Whatever the case might be. But your identity lives on that network. And if for some reason either one of those networks decides that what you were doing is inappropriate, not only do they prevent you from doing it further on the network, but when they remove you, they delete your identity. You're simply gone, right? So everything that you use to define yourself on these networks and make that definition available to whatever group of people you make it available to, if you are removed or suspended, is gone. All of the content that you have contributed to the network, everything that you've posted perhaps for years, is gone, right? So what I refer to as the identity is essentially what you see on a post that gives a user a name and typically an image and sometimes some profile information. So if you click through, there might be a short bio.
So you're distinguishing between identity and the content that is posted using the identity, and you're also distinguishing it from like the follower lists that the relationships that the identity has, right? Because I'm not really sure the value of an identity to a person is actually really closely bound up. I think, especially with the relationships that people have, the following and followed relationships, but maybe also the collection, the specific collection of content on Twitter. So it's just kind of interesting to me. It's a philosophical question, right? What an identity is, if you want to include the content and the relationships in addition to the, I don't know.
Well, I think you do. The identity, the way that I use the term, is the anchor for all of those things. So in other words, if you have, let's say you have a Twitter account that has 100,000 followers, people are following the identity. And then all of those followers, that's a list of other Twitter identities that you could probably download and save, but you can't do anything with it because you've now lost your Twitter identity, or you've been restricted in some fashion. So I do draw a distinction between identity and content and the rest of it, but the identity is the anchor. The identity is the way that you find some person with whom you have a relationship, or who produces content that that you enjoy consuming, right? And then the second piece, the second leg on the stool, so to speak, is the content itself. And that has a very similar problem in all of these networks. The content resides on the network. If you produce short videos and share them on TikTok, and then you lose your TikTok account, those short videos are gone. If you are removed from YouTube, your YouTube library is gone. If you are removed from Facebook, anything that you've posted there is gone. If you're removed from Twitter, anything that you've posted to Twitter is gone. So you have a library of content, in some cases, that has been produced over a period of years at considerable effort and expense, that could just simply vanish because you've somehow run afoul of a policy of some sort, right? And so my solution to that is to make the content portable so that you can keep a copy of it and just re-inject it anywhere else you'd like to. And then the third piece is the interoperability, which is, in my version of that, is pretty similar to everything that everyone else is talking about. I'm doing a particular implementation of it in which, the network it's not federated exactly. It's open so that any new network can begin ingesting the entirety of anything produced on any other network, so that in the event that network A decides that they don't like what I'm doing and prevents me from publishing on that network, I can simply go set up network B, pull in all of the content from network A, which is all explicitly public, and recreate it and add my own to it.
And wouldn't it also be the case that if the identities were truly self-owned and decentralized, that anybody who had been following your ID would continue to be following your ID, even if your the place that you got your internet connection changed, and your host and the client that you use and all of those things changed?
Yes, you can. In my networks, you can host your own identity, which means that you can keep it even if you're removed from your dozen favorite networks.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If I can add on the interoperability thing. Oh, go ahead. Were you?
No. Please go ahead.
So I absolutely agree. Interoperability is crucial, and one of the ways I often illustrate interoperability to users who aren't familiar with the term, I say, think of it like email. Email is not perfectly portable, but it is very portable, as in, if you don't like one email provider, you can download your inbox and your contact list and go over to another one, because the protocols are open and the data format of the emails are open. And so you have a very rich choice of providers, and you can take your toys and go home. Now, the reason I say email is not perfectly portable is because, of course, you do lose your identifier, like Christian mentioned. You do lose that email, and if the previous service provider doesn't do a forwarding service, you're out of luck. So the portability of identifiers is actually an even harder problem than the portability of the data, of the content.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what we want to do with social media is what email did to proprietary messaging, essentially.
Right. Well, I don't have a whole lot to add to all of that. I think you guys explained it pretty well. But I want to illustrate the concept actually by applying it to the real world problem of making social media interoperable and owning your own social media identity. All right. So what would that mean? Well, there's a different ways of doing it, but on one notion, I have something like an email address. So one of the Knowledge Standards Foundation's board members, I was just talking to him an hour ago, and he likes to make the very good point that a portable identity, a self-owned identity, is very similar to an email address, but one where you own your own domain. So basically, no one can take it away from you. You can host it in lots of different places if you want. Like if you're on GoDaddy, then you can move to A hosting or A2 hosting or whatever. Or you could do your own hosting. And similarly, as you were saying, Dmitri, if my data, the data that I've developed, I've tweeted thousands of times, and I'd like to be able to take the zip file of my tweets and just move it to some Twitter-like service and just like start over from there and without missing a beat. But I can't do that because Twitter doesn't represent, it doesn't use a shared data standard. Now, there are shared data standards for social media out there. So activity pub, that specifies the architecture, but the data standard, what is it called? It's
activity streams too.
Activity streams.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like RSS or Atom, but for social media. So that's very cool. And it's a cynical and shameful fact about these corporations that when they export the data, they don't do so into such an open standard. They could, it wouldn't, I mean, they've got billions of dollars. It wouldn't take very much money for them to do that. They don't. And why not? Because they don't want to support the standard. So it isn't just that there be a standard. It actually has to be a standard in use. It has to be in broad use, one that supports a lot of different, well, is supported by many different networks. So here's the problem. There are a zillion also ran social media networks, right? There's dozens of them that have over 1,000 active members, I imagine. All right, so in addition to the big Silicon Valley ones, then there's the Fetiverse and all the Fetiverse servers. There's only one big one, that's Mastodon. There's Diaspora, and then actually, no, Gab is the biggest Fetiverse server now because they switched to the Fetiverse, and they're like much bigger than Mastodon.
Yeah, the Fetiverse is not proud of that.
They don't like that. They don't like that. Yes, and there's a number of others. You said Secure Scuttlebutt. That's really cool, but it doesn't have like an internet implementation. You actually have to hand deliver the data, and it's synced up, which is actually really cool. And the way that it works is really neat, but it doesn't solve the problem. Doesn't scratch the itch. And each of these things, for the most part, has its own standard. And that, I think, is the problem that a lot of people are missing, and which it is, and that they don't want to solve, right? Because all of these networks, they have proud geeks behind them who don't want to like give up their work or anything, you know. And so they remain in a kind of stasis of competition, which, you know, the Silicon Valley giants love, right? So what I think is, what I want to propose, and I guess this is a way to transition from this question to the next, is that there be an already existing standard that is used as a data formatting standard, and which can then become a lingua franca for, and for that matter, for all of the other existing social media networks like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and the rest. So, and what is that? It's RSS. So you could use RSS to transmit social media data. It might require a few add-ons, and but as soon as you do that, any given RSS tool like WordPress or Drupal or whatever instantly becomes potentially, at least, a tool to create social media and publish it. And over 1/3 of the websites online now publish their content using RSS because they are WordPress sites. That's huge. And, you know, if you were to take all of the blogs out there, and basically if you're a blog, then you use RSS. All the blogs out there together, taken as a whole, would probably rank in the top 10. If they were a single website, they would rank in the top 10 of websites. So it's a huge phenomenon, and I think it's an open content standard. So it's like the obvious choice as far as I'm concerned. So what I would like to do is show you guys what I have been working on here. And I'm going to share my screen. So if you'll bear with me a little bit. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and use this. And I'm going to I'll go ahead and go to Minifeed to begin with. So this looks like a Twitter feed, as you can see, although there are a number of different posts here. What it really is a WordPress group blog. I mean, that's all it is, with a certain, you know, theme that is running it. But right now, it doesn't pull in posts from different sources, but the next version of this will do so. So let me go ahead and write something here to just show you how it works. Oops. So as you can see, you know, I can add a picture or whatever. And let's see here. How about I'll put up this contents of my book. So the look and feel is very similar to a social media, a typical sort of social media site. You can change the length of the minimum length of the or maximum length of the posts. I don't know what we set it at here on Minifeed. I think it might have been 280. Let's look at the showcase here. Oh, and just by the way, this, sorry, yeah, this right here it just popped up without refreshing the page. So in other words, as far as that basic functionality goes, it's what you would expect. Now, this right here is my own personal install of Minifeed. Notice it is located on my own self-owned domain. And if I turn my camera, I'm gonna have to stop sharing my screen here. And I turn my camera down here. This right here is my NAS. So it's a Synology NAS. And that is actually where Start This is running from. So you can't get more decentralized than this. I'm using open source software with to run an open standards site from something that I on hardware that I own, using a domain that I own. And when we have added to Start This, let me share my screen again. When we have added to Start This again, I don't know if I succeed in sharing my screen. There we go. When we've added to Minifeed, that's the name of the theme, the ability to track your identity and to sign posts with a DID web identity. That's the piece that you guys are working on. Then it will be an identity that I own as well, and the identity itself will be portable. I'll actually be able to take that and move it anywhere. And the content that I've signed with my identity, as long as I don't lose my private key, I will be able to unlock and prove that it was mine, and I'll be able to republish it elsewhere, however much I like. So this is my vision. So another part of the vision then is that this blog or microblogging tool will take on posts from a lot of other mini feeds to begin with. So like here's a mini meme thing here, and it's just a meme collection. So if I subscribe to mini meme and maybe to Hampson's mini feed here and whatnot, then when I load this, I'm just going to see a variety of different authors' posts, probably to begin with in reverse chronological order. And then the next step after that will be to be able to respond. So if we go back to, so imagine this is my personal mini feed, and here's a post from Tim, which is appearing in it. Then the idea is I could come over here and I could write a reply, and oh, this has a little bug. It doesn't automatically refresh, so I had to refresh the page. Anyway, this would be posted here, but also posted on Tim's mini feed automatically, kind of like a ping back in RSS in blogging. So it might even make use of that system to a certain extent. I'm not sure, but something similar to that. And again, in order to make this work, we might have to extend RSS a little bit. But for the most part, the resources are already there. RSS is very extensible, and it's big enough for the most part. So that is what I'd like to do. And one last thing. The next step after that then is I want to be able to post. When I'm posting here, I want my posts to go I want my post to be able to start here and then wind up. So here it is right here. This is a pinned post on top. If we go over to Twitter, here it is, you see. So this is a copy of the post, and it has a little a mention of the origin, right? So I'd like the same thing to be done on all kinds of social media networks. You know, if it has a picture, perhaps it'll automatically be placed on Instagram. If it's over a certain number of characters, maybe it will be posted on Facebook, but not Twitter. Or who knows how exactly it might work. And similarly, if anybody answers this, right? All right. Then this reply, anyway, you saw it. This reply should, it's not doing it yet, but it should show up here, right? That would be neat. That is what interoperability means. That's what it would mean in practical terms. And interoperability between mini feeds on the one hand and Twitter. But then we need to do that for all of social media, right? That is what decentralized social media looks like. So let's go ahead and let me stop sharing my screen here and let you guys have a chance to get back into it. I'd like you, if you would, to explain and demo the tools that you're working on in the way that I have, and sort of like explain what it has to do with decentralizing social media. So Dmitri, I'm very curious about Solid and what sort of role Solid might play in this. So if you could explain about that and anything else that you want to, that you've been working on, and just sort of explain it as if nobody had ever heard of it before.
That's tough. So Solid, which loosely derives from social linked data, it's a set of specifications and code libraries and reference implementations that allow you to publish and interact with linked data and images, movies, arbitrary files. So what does that mean? That sounds fairly abstract. For the geeks out there, for those who are familiar with the old protocol WebDAV, which was essentially a way to put a file system like you have on your desktop and expose it to the web. I
use it for my calendar.
Excellent, yeah. So I often describe it as an updated WebDAV, a spiritual successor to WebDAV, that has cross-domain identity and cross-domain access control. What does that mean? It means much like, let's say, if you're using Google Docs and you created a spreadsheet and you want to share it with somebody, Now, it's easy to do in Google Docs because both the contact and the spreadsheet itself lives in Google's databases. But what Solid is able to do is to host that file. Everybody hosts it on their domain. So Larry would host it on Start This. And if I was in Larry's contact book, you'd be able to share any file or any document or any piece of data, any directory, by going to your Solid interface, looking at your contacts, and giving read access, for example, or read-write access to Dmitri, who doesn't have an account. So this is what's interesting about Solid. It allows collaboration and interoperability between parties who have no prior relationship. Means I don't have an account on Larry's domain. I just have an account on my own, and I just met Larry. But still, if I give you my identifier, my domain name, essentially, you're able to share arbitrary files with me. So yes, so a webization, if you will, of the file system with cross-domain identity and access control. Now, there's a lot more to it. There is lots of schemas for things like user profiles and feeds, WebSocket messaging, but at its core,
you threw some important words at us that are like essential to understand, but I think I understood what they meant, but I have a feeling a lot of people wouldn't. So you said cross-domain identity and access control. All right. So can you explain what those mean, and can you explain what they mean in making your explanation? Explain why I wouldn't want to just share a URL where I have uploaded the file, like FTP or just putting it on the web.
Right. Great questions, both. So what I mean by, let's start with cross-domain identity. So we've all seen server-specific identity, meaning I have an account on some server. I have an account on Twitter. I am user 12345 on Slashdot or Reddit. We all have account IDs. Now, the interesting thing about those account IDs is that they're not globally unique, right? Naive implementations just have a auto-incrementing database field. Some of them are slightly more sophisticated and use UUIDs, universal random identifiers. But the point is that only that particular server, only that particular company or service knows that user ID. It's only relevant and it's only unique within that context. One of the first cross-domain identifiers we've seen on the internet are emails. Now, emails, like well-formed, are globally unique. If I know the identifier, I know how to resolve it. I know how to talk to you. Obviously, I need to know the protocols, but email is a good example. So what Solid in particular uses is a type of identifier called web IDs, which is essentially an HTTPS URL, a link to a domain where some key data files are hosted. A user profile is hosted, essentially. And there's some magic under the hood, and by magic, I do mean open standards, that allows you to do a couple of interesting things. It allows you to prove by a digital signature that you've authored a piece of content, or to sign a verifiable credential, for example. And it allows you to perform access control operations, which is the other question. So why does access control matter? And how is it different from, let's say, just publishing a file on a random URL? The most interesting thing about access control is the write capability. And what that means is, in general, the read operation on the web, meaning an HTTP GET to some file somewhere, is a solved problem. It's been a solved problem since 1989 or whenever it started. But a universally standardized ability to write or update something, that's much harder. So you're absolutely right. If you just want to control the read access for something, yes, paste it to a random opaque URL, share the link. It's the nature of the opaque random URL means that nobody can guess it. So unless somebody shares the URL, there it is, problem solved. But what about if you want to collaborate on a document? What about if you want, here's your album space, please upload pictures from the party we were at, right? That sort of thing. That becomes much harder, especially in a way where you don't have accounts on my system and I don't have accounts on yours.
Mhm.
So let's see, was there another question there? Those are the two I could remember.
No, I think you pretty much explained it. Yeah, very good. But well, I do have one further question though, and that is, what does this have to do with social media?
Okay, good.
And also,
Thank you.
there's one thing that you didn't in your intro, you didn't explain that this is a project started by Tim Berners-Lee.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah, typical engineer, immediately dove in to the technical explanation. So Solid Project was started by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web. It was started at MIT, although now it's a larger community project. Parts of MIT are involved, but lots of contributors throughout. And Tim Berners-Lee himself took a sabbatical from his professorship at MIT and founded a startup called Interoperable that is developing, that is sponsoring the standard, developing some reference implementations. But in addition, there are open source versions throughout the community. So thank you for that. And what does it have to do with social media? So, couple of things. The reason I think Solid is key to social media, it's specifically key to a very particular style of social media, which is private and semi-private posts, filtered posts, and so on. Can you do public social media without Solid? Absolutely. Like you said, RSS, Atom, the current Fetiverse, for example, email, sure. All examples of public, not access controlled social media. What Solid allows you to do is it does two things. One, it cares very much about interoperable data models. So it uses, for example, Activity Streams 2 for the format of social media posts and comments and things, or it would use the vCard standard for contact books, and so on. So whenever possible, it looks to existing standards and uses those for data format, or when not, tries to build community consensus for new ones if there isn't a convenient standard involved. So what Solid offers is support for open standard social media schemas and data models, and also access controlled social media, which, like both you and Christian said, is another complicated topic entirely. Also has to do with, is anything really private on the internet, even if it's encrypted? Anybody can still record your packets, and in 100 years down the line, or 5 years down the line with quantum computing, we'll be able to break that encryption, and so on. So all of that stuff, setting that aside for a second, Solid is able to do social media on the level of a friends only post on Facebook or a group filtered post on LiveJournal back in the day. So,
right. Very good. Okay. Sounds cool. Sounds useful. And there aren't any, what sort of tools have been built for the solid network? Is there anything that you can demo at this point?
So I didn't prepare any of the demos, and it's very much a project in progress. But so a lot has been built by the Solid community, and I was one of the engineers working on it back in the MIT days, and now I'm just a open source contributor, and I'm one of the editors on the Solid specification. So what's out there? 3 or 4. So 3 open source servers and 1 enterprise proprietary one. That one's by Interrupt. A number of open source general purpose read-write clients. So libraries in various languages, starting with JavaScript, that allow you to authenticate to any participating Solid server and read and write data from it. So that's sort of the core low-level stuff, so servers and clients. And then a number of applications have been built on top of it. Like, for example, a number of chat programs. I know there's a couple, actually, I know there's a couple of social media even startups, like classic Facebook-like thing with posts and photo galleries and things like that. So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So for those who are curious, I would definitely encourage everyone to go to the Solid project. Let me just double check that it's solidproject.org. So Solid, like as opposed to liquid, project.org. Yeah.
If you want to share your screen and show us anything.
Sure. 1 second.
You'll be able to now.
Yeah, 1 second. Right. So for those that are curious, I highly recommend visit the Solid project. There's like an About Solid page and a developer tutorial and a bit of history of Solid. The Solid community holds monthly events that are Zoom calls currently. There's forums, there's GitHub repositories for the project, and there's of course Gitter chat channels, so which you can all find from the starting page. So highly recommend it. I don't have any particular application that I would want to demo right now. Sure. Just don't have one handy, but I think you'll be able to discover some from the page. Okay.
Cool. All right. Very good. Well, good to know. Christian, so you have been very busy developing the public square network for Ology. And that, I mean, you've explained it many times to me, but now you have to explain it to somebody who, to people who have never heard it before. So take it away.
Okay, so we have a small startup with a little bit of funding called Ology Newswire Inc. And we're building what we call the public square network. And it's actually written into our charter that all of the technology will be released open source as soon as it's ready, which we're hoping for by the end of the year at this point. The public square network is a fully interoperable set of networks that are organized around publisher identity and globally addressed content. In other words, an identity might be anywhere, a piece of content might be anywhere, it would be recognized across any of the networks, so that if you were to publish a piece of content on one network, it could be transferred to another, and if you were to publish it there as well, we could deduplicate because everything is globally recognized. It's all tied back to the identity. Everything is verifiable based on cryptographic signatures. So it's very easy that way. And the content itself, what we call them articles, are they're structured and entirely portable, so that you could actually save them as files and do all sorts of different things with them. You can host them on your own website. You can put together an archive of them and ship them around. You can put them back into a network somewhere else. The whole thing becomes completely portable. And then the interoperability is driven by the fact that these networks are entirely public. The only thing that you would ever put into a public square network is the sort of thing that you would put into a real public square, which is to say you are making some kind of a statement, you are publishing something, and your intent is that people should be able to find it and read it and use it. All right. So there isn't any privacy or anything like that. The idea is that people will be able to produce content and distribute it, and distribute the content that they like and disregard the content that they don't like.
So can I interrupt you for a second here? Isn't basically, would you say that then is the most significant difference between the public square network and Solid then on your view? Like, so Solid is can be very choosy about the permissions, whereas the public square network is meant as a very public publishing platform, essentially.
Yeah, the public square network, the name is chosen based on the legal concept of the public square, right? So if you, for example, step into a public park and put your little soapbox down and stand up and start saying something, anybody in the area is free to film you, and anybody in earshot can hear you, and they can record it, they can pass it around. You are literally participating in a public square. Now, we made the networks interoperable, and we made them very, very easy to replicate from one network to another, because in the real world, or in the online digital world, everyone who runs a server is actually running a private service. It isn't really a public square. So in order to make it behave like a public square, you have to have mechanisms that enable other people to take that content and move it where they want it to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. That's I actually, yeah, you taught me something new today. I didn't actually quite think of it in that way, but that does make sense. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's entirely based on U.S. law, specifically U.S. law. And the first networks that roll out will actually be limited to U.S. IP addresses. We're not going to bother trying to meet the legal requirements of the rest of the world. I think we have enough problems to solve here first. I think it's a fair statement.
Does that mean that people in other countries would not be able to participate, or under what circumstances would they?
Well, they could participate if they wanted to launch their own networks and operate them under their own rules, right? So, for example, if you were to launch a network in Germany or Saudi Arabia, right, you have a very different set of requirements about what can and cannot go on that network. So if you wanted a public square network in one of those areas, then it would become your responsibility to meet the legal requirements of the jurisdiction in which you operate, which are very different from the legal requirements of the United States.
Would it be, so this implies that there is sort of a national or legal boundary division of an important part of the internet, of basically public content, or that's what you're envisioning. Would there be some mechanisms for there to be like the free flow of information across international boundaries? I mean, it sounds weird talking about the internet as having international boundaries, right?
Well, there wouldn't be anything to prevent someone from using United States IP address via proxy or something like that to take the content and then replicate it into another jurisdiction. But the reality is that when you do that, you've shouldered certain legal responsibilities, and it's now incumbent upon you to enforce whatever rules and regulations are appropriate in the jurisdiction where you're operating.
And when you say you here, you're actually talking about like an entrepreneur or whatever who would be who would like use the public square software that you're talking about and setting up a similar network in the UK or Germany or China or whatever, wherever, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. Continue.
Well, so we're fairly far along. We have a scalable individual node. We've created our network with the American Registry of Internet Numbers, Aaron. We should be gaining our own IP space here shortly, and we should be able to roll out something within a month or so that forms the back end of traffic exchange between participating publishers. So we'll see how that goes. I could actually show you what we have now. We publish it on Ology.com. We publish it on Ology.com, and it's, I think what's up there now is probably about a month behind at this point. Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
Yep, there we go. And can you see it? There we go. Are you guys able to see that? So what this is we're replicating the public domain statements of senators and congressmen on Twitter at the moment. And we're not updating very quickly. I think it's every 20 minutes or so. Most recent was 9 minutes ago. But we've created identities for each of them, and you can see what's in the identity by expanding the top of each one of these articles. And as you'll notice, there's quite a few of them. So this is constantly updating, and the idea is that the what you see here is the feed that you've assembled. In this case, this is a feed assembled from the 550 or so identities that we were able to find for public officials on Twitter, and you can craft a feed based on any set of identities. And actually, there's a lot more logic that you could apply to it if you wanted to, but we maintain several search indexes clusters behind this so that we can do feeds with very complex queries, or we can also do searches that would be text-based and allow you to dig into whatever search just by simple keywords. But this is this is all that we've exposed at this point. But each one of these items is a piece of structured data with a signature attached to it in the form of a JSON web signature that is verified individually by the server when it's posted and by the client when it's displayed, to ensure that it actually is from the purported author, in this case Debbie Lesko, Arizona's 8th district. And these are all the ones that we could find. It's not partisan in any way. It's just whoever happened to be a representative or a senator. So we've got Sheldon Whitehouse.
I was going to ask you why what does it mean to be signed, and why would you want to? But I guess what you're saying is whatever this signing is, it proves that it comes from like Ted Lieu here or whatever, or John Ossoff, and that it originated, I suppose, with his Twitter account. I believe you also told me that this senator would be able to theoretically come to Ology.com and essentially claim his identity, theoretically, but you might not want to let the senators do that because you want to have your own canonical copy of.
Yeah, we'll figure that out. There's something to be said for keeping track of what your elected representatives are doing, regardless of what they want you to keep track of.
Sure.
So that's a little bit of a that's an open question. The other thing is each of these actually links away to Twitter. Right. Boom. There you go.
Uh-huh.
So we store where it came from as well. But the first real use case of it is going to be traffic exchange for a set of publishers.
Mhm.
But let's see, is there anything else that I should share about this at this point? I'll have more to share when we actually release all of the code and probably a bunch of other things as well.
Uh-huh. Wouldn't you say that the name Newswire is a little misleading? Because I mean,
Well,
it isn't a newswire in the sense that like PR newswire is a newswire, right?
well, actually, it is. The
Huh.
the content that you see there is public domain, which is why that's what we're populating the network with.
Okay.
We actually started crawling various websites by RSS. Ultimately, determined that the implementations of RSS in the wild are varied enough and reliant enough on deprecated tech from Google that it probably wasn't the best way to go. We still have that. We also can pull in content from WebHose, which is one of these companies that that browses the entirety of the internet all the time. And we do direct crawling from sitemaps. Sitemaps, of course, are the standard mechanism whereby if you want your site to be included in the search engines, you put out your robots.txt and invite search engine crawlers in, and the sitemap gives them a map of everything on the site, and then you keep that updated very frequently. So if you want your content indexed in Google, for example, it's important that you have a sitemap, and as a result, that's become pretty widespread. So those are the ways that we're doing that now. We're only exposing at this point the public domain information because it's legally public domain. These are the statements of United States representatives and senators. We will begin exposing once we have agreements to a lot of newsy type content, content from news sites, content from political sites, and so on and so forth. But right now, what we have up is just public domain.
I see what you're saying. Okay. All right. So now let's talk about the last question, which is basically what the relationships are between these projects that we've discussed here. I mean, I would like to think that we all would like our these networks to be as much as this makes any sense at all, interoperable, or insofar as there is social media being carried on the on these networks anyway. I at least think that the social media content should be made interoperable. So if I on Start This, my microblog, I make a post and I put it out there, what could be done with it by the public Square network? And
Sure.
then I'd ask a similar question about Solid for Dmitri.
Right. So I'll take the public Square network piece. So if you have a Start This or any blog or microblog, and you wanted to participate in the public Square network, what you would do is you would craft an identity, and we have a client that does this, create some keys, and then take each piece of each article that you wish to publish via the public Square network and submit it to any of the public Square network broadcasters, that's what we call them, that is willing to carry your stuff.
So
and then
you're going
it
very
would go into
fast
the
here.
indexes.
I think you're going very fast. So I need to go back to the part where you talk about creating an identity. There, I believe you're talking about one of these DID web identities, aren't you?
Yes, it's a particular flavor of DID web.
Okay.
And we have a,
And it
we have
wouldn't
a,
be created on ology.com. It would be,
no,
yeah.
we will host it for you. We have id.ology.com where you can create and submit an identity that we will carry for you. But if you're a professional publisher and you wish to maintain control of your own identity and content, then we strongly recommend that you use our software to create the identity and then host it on your own domain so that it's always under your control.
I see. So, and then what Ology will do, I gather then from what you're telling me, is once I've like created this identity on Start This or with any Minifeed, then I would be able to add Start This somehow, and we don't know how exactly yet, but add it to Ology, and then Ology actually starts anything that I post on my on Start This is republished or mirrored by Ology, and then when it does that, it actually becomes part of the public Square network. So have I got it right then?
Yes, you would be essentially syndicating your content into the public Square network, and from there it would take on a life of its own. But the way that it gets there is that once you have the identity with the keys and the permissions set up, you can just simply script a crawl from sitemap or RSS, or if you like, we can help you extend the the native Minifeed interface so that you have a graphical interface that gives you a checkbox that says publish this.
Uh-huh. I see. And of course that could be done by default too. It's like everything I write on Start This should be available via Minifeed. Why would someone want to do this? Why would what advantage would there be to putting it in the public Square network in addition to just putting it on a URL and or putting it out over RSS and making it available by RSS feed readers?
The reason that you would want to do it is so that you can interact with other participants in the network. And some of the participants in the network are going to be very large sites that have very large viewership. So let's suppose, for example, you could put together, I don't know, like a small documentary about Encyclosphere, and you wanted this to be, you wanted to spread this around and get publicity for it. It would be possible to first put it into the public Square network and then reach out to other people and ask them to put it into their feeds, which are then at that point showcased on various sites where potentially hundreds of millions of people see them.
Right. So does the copy of the file then that lives in the public Square network, it's not exclusively on Ology servers, right? Haven't you by that time put it into BitTorrent essentially?
Right. So there are two pieces. We have metadata, which is the information that describes the post and goes into the indexes. And that's actually arranged so that it is also BitTorrent meta info, which means that you can include all of the signatures of pieces to and a web seed for an actual an actual piece of content like a video or something like that. And then the metadata is circulated through the public Square network. And if people want to pull the content, for example, your documentary, then that gets pulled over WebTorrent.
Okay. Very interesting. All right. And well, just to tie a bow on that, so Chris and I have been talking about this for a while, and one thing that we have talked about is the possibility of making Minifeed blogs just sort of automatically available. So that's the button that he was talking about. Automatically available via the public Square network, and then the public Square network actually becomes a clearinghouse or an aggregator that could be used by future Minifeed feed readers, and could actually be it would be the first of a necessary, probably very necessary aggregator for actually not just for social media, but also for other kinds of content, including encyclopedic content. So that's the other use, that, you know, when somebody puts something up into the encyclosphere, then they would be encouraged to put it on the public Square network, which would make it a lot easier, and other aggregators, right? Because we don't want it centralized again. We don't want Christian's Ology, a for-profit company, to be the only aggregator of such data, obviously. Indeed, it could be out, you know, distributed via various other distribution methods, I imagine.
Sure.
But, yeah.
Yeah, all of the network components, inclusive of the search clusters, will be made openly available. So if you wanted to do something with encyclopedia content, you could use it as is, or you could extend the metadata with appropriate information that is relevant to you know, encyclopedia articles, and then just run, you know, a specific set of search clusters that would support feeds and also hookups. I suspect probably you want more of the search capability rather than complex feed assembly.
Right. Right.
But yeah, you could easily take this and launch your own encyclopedia search engine.
I see. So, Dmitri, how does Solid fit in with a sort of system that Christian and I have been talking about, if at all? What do you?
Good question. So Solid is definitely, at least at this stage, a set of low-level tools rather than any particular application or service. So, and at the moment, I'm not aware of many Solid apps that publish RSS, although they certainly could be altered to publish RSS feeds. Where I could see Solid would be useful is if, for example, you wanted to so one of the Solid servers, for example, when you create an account, also creates a DID web identity, very similar to the kind that Christian was mentioning for you, right? So you could integrate the open source public Square client into a particular Solid server. Similarly, you could use login with Solid as one of the authentication methods for the Minifeed client, right? So it offers you a couple of tools that are useful here and there.
Interesting. Very good. And so I'm just trying to wrap my head around a very general problem, right? And that is how to make social media in general more interoperable. All right. Why don't let's just leave it the question as broad as that, and Can you just give me some more of your thoughts on that one, Dmitri?
So this is definitely a when you have a hammer, etc. Kind of moment. I genuinely do believe in the effectiveness of some of the open standards organizations like W3C and like IETF. Yes, of course, it's their mere existence or even forming any particular working group doesn't solve the problem outright. But I do think they are interesting places to continue this kind of discussion. So for example, there's a W3C social web community group that one could join and continue discussion there. I'm certain there are working groups and community groups at IETF about that pertain to some of the protocols both Minifeed and Public Square is doing. There is, for example, the Decentralized Identifier Working Group or the Credentials Community Group at W3C, which if I understand correctly, Christian's tech stack, some of it uses the tech that was incubated in the Credentials Community Group. So I think one of the more effective ways, aside from keep talking about it, keep researching, continue these conversations. But if you're an engineer or a technologist, I highly encourage you to join one of these communities that is working towards standardizing social media.
Right. Okay. Well, that makes sense. And I suppose we have to make time to do that because we haven't actually on the KSF too much, but mostly because the standards, the approaches that I have seen that the W3C has been taking, the activity pub and then also similarly, what is it called? GNU Social, I think. They're not peer-to-peer. They're server to server, not individual to individual, peer-to-peer, right? So I draw a distinction, in other words. I mean, technically, maybe there isn't an important distinction, but from the end user's perspective, there definitely is. If I have to set up and run a complicated server in order to have my own independent node in the network, then it's not really a fully peer-to-peer if the peers are individual human beings. I mean, not servers. Go ahead.
You're absolutely right. And I have some theories on why the initial implementations of the Fetiverse take form as federated servers with multiple accounts. I think part of it has to do with cross-domain access control and cross-domain accounts is difficult. So they took an existing working approach of a solved problem, which is multiple accounts on a single server, which is how we get to that federation thing. However, I do think that some of the standards that the Fediverse uses, such as the data model for the feeds or for the user profile and so on, could be useful to peer-to-peer. This is my individual server. It is push button. It is easy. It is hosted on my Synology NAS.
If it's possible, right? Exactly. Or even if it could be some when you get some hosting space from GoDaddy or Bluehost or whatever, there are these just like push button solutions, like press a button here to install a WordPress blog or to install a wiki or whatever. So maybe
we certainly could get there.
Yeah, maybe it could be like that. That would That would make sense, I guess.
I agree. Are you familiar with OwnCloud or Nextcloud?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I think they're a pretty decent example of sort of WordPress push button like installation. They've got a pretty big community, and they've done a lot of, and they've for example,
that's NASs. That's if you're running your own, your own NAS, your own server.
Right.
So
right.
Just for the people who don't know what it is, Nextcloud it's like a server software for internet servers run from home, basically. And with Nextcloud, you can quickly and easily install like a calendar app, a Dropbox type app, and that sort of thing. And then you can access those things from your phone or from your desktop or wherever.
So the reason I mention them is that recently, in the last year or two, the Nextcloud community has actively gotten involved in the Solid community and have implemented Solid compatibility, so with the Nextcloud servers. But you're absolutely right. There's still a long way to go until we can get to the ease of use that WordPress has.
But that isn't going to solve the problem that really needs to be solved, which is if there's going to be true social media interoperability, it involves creating pathways for people to talk across, even from Twitter to Facebook and back. Maybe that's the only solution they want, but that's an interoperability problem that neither Twitter nor Facebook will support themselves, but they can't stop people from using external tools to make it easier, right? They could try.
So they do. They are very active in enforcing their terms of service, which are restrictive in several key interoperability areas. So the moment your interoperability cross-posting client software does something that is against the terms of service, they do revoke it. Like I've had it happen to me, I've had it happen to a lot of the engineers. So they are very careful policing that stuff.
Yeah, but what they won't do is take away your ability to post if it looks like it just an ordinary person posting for himself. So he's running his own software, and that's he's running a website that. And anyway, I'm not gonna. I won't try to explain what I have in mind. I think it's possible. I think it's possible to whether they want to or not. And besides, Twitter supports this, right? Twitter, for example, to a certain extent anyway, it supports WordPress plugins, for example, and all kinds of other software that will post to Twitter from off of Twitter. And then, of course, there's nothing really stopping you from taking your own stuff. It is your own content after all, okay, and exporting it to your your micro feed or some other place which is participating in a truly decentralized, interoperable social media web.
You're absolutely right. Mm-hmm.
So, Christian, any thoughts on that?
On that? Well, so when I put the public square networks together, one of the requirements that I kept in mind was that it should be something that could be expressed entirely in static files. And the reason that I adopted that constraint was because if you look at all of these cloud providers, one of the cheapest things that you can do, and by cheap I mean very nearly zero cost, and in some cases actually zero cost, is operate a static website, right? So for example, if you have a set of static files that you want to publish on the internet, and you get yourself an Amazon Web Services account, you can put those in S3 and you can configure a CloudFront instance in front of them, and that will probably cost you very nearly nothing. I mean, it's astonishingly inexpensive. And if you don't want that, you can use Cloudflare or some of these others. But from that perspective, it wouldn't be particularly difficult for us to get to cloud-based single button installations when we get there. First, I want to solve the problem for the large publishers, so that there's a reason to do this. And of course, the reason is that you have something important to say, and you want other people to carry it and showcase it to hundreds of millions of people. Right? It's a reach network at the end of the day. But there is a path forward there that is reasonably well thought out. We just haven't gone down it yet.
See, okay, right, yeah, and well, we will probably be counting on you to act as an intermediary. So if basically, if Sally has a Twitter feed and opts to put her own tweets onto the public square network, Twitter certainly can't stop her from doing that. And then the idea is that I can follow Sally's feed via the public square network, if you support that. And then the same would also go with other social media services. So like, would you be open, for example, to working with Minds or with Getter, or for that matter, with the Fetiverse, and putting the content that is there on the public square network and making it available via RSS also?
Yeah, I could relatively easily support activity streams. The primary obstacle to overcome is that we're attaching signatures to every article, and that's what we call them. They're not a tweet; they're an article. So every article has a signature on it and is a discrete piece of content that can be transported anywhere by any means, and still verified that there's been no modification or tampering or anything of the sort, and the origin, the source of that content is known. We would have to work through making that work, but supporting output by activity stream would be relatively straightforward. We just wouldn't necessarily have the signatures unless they've gotten to the point that they're doing that. I don't know if they are yet.
I think they're working on that part. Yeah.
They're working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it could come together, sooner than we think. I imagine. I mean, this is a specific, very simple network built for a very specific purpose that doesn't have a lot of the complexity and doesn't have a lot of the functionality of the other networks, but could potentially be useful for people who do from time to time want to take something that they feel is important and put it in front of a large number of people.
Right. Very interesting. Good. I mean, I have not run out of questions, but I've run out of time.
These are all good questions. These are all good conversations for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And so I want to thank you both for showing up here, especially Dmitri, because basically we've never met, and I know you're a very busy developer and have some responsible for some really interesting things going on there.
It's been a pleasure talking with you and with Christian. Thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. And thanks also, Christian. So I think with that, we're going to have to wrap it up. I wish we could go on, but yeah, I think we've really used as much time as we can. Cheers,
everyone.
All right.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you. So
Thank you. Have a great night.
So folks, I just wanted to add a little something to the end of the video. It's Thursday, and I've decided there isn't really time to do our weekly Friday meeting and also launch this video this week. So on Wednesday, I propose to have a group discussion. So sit down and we'll make it more open, perhaps have more, a wider variety of people from, you know, the Knowledge Standards Foundation mailing list, and for that matter, also just other people, and have perhaps more of a free-ranging discussion about how to make decentralized social media a reality. Okay, so I've figured it out. I've made a little poll on Slack with the regulars, and so we've decided on Wednesday at 2 p.m. 2 p.m. and look forward to seeing you there. We'll discuss the same questions that the three of us discussed in this video, and whatever else you want to talk about really regarding how to decentralize social media. All right.